We are now starting the second section of this lesson on mental contamination and inadmissible evidences. The section 2. So, according to the study we have seen, professional judges proved incapable of ignoring inadmissible information. As for normal human beings, it seems that ignoring what we know is extremely difficult. In the words of the poet Paul Valéry, man's great misfortune is that he has no organ, no kind of eyelid or break to mask or block a thought, or all thought, when he wants to. Or to use another image which has been introduced by the authors of the study, it is very hard, even for professional judges, to unbite the apple of knowledge. Psychologists have inquired on the psychological processes underlying our failure to ignore important information. We will focus on three phenomena here: lack of motivation, the ironic process, and mental contamination. Lack of motivation and psychological reactance. People may not agree that the information should be discarded, either for epistemic or extra epistemic reasons. This is not particularly interesting from a psychological point of view. What it is interesting is that sometimes the recommendation to disregard an information may increase the agent's desire to use that information. This is a form of reverse psychology, if you want. In particular, this phenomenon has been called psychological reactance. The agent feels that her autonomy is threatened by a certain source. The reaction consists in disobeying the command in order to restore the sense of autonomy. Look at the scheme in the slide. In this case, the agent knows that she is disobeying to the rule. Therefore, as far as her beliefs are concerned, we may say that she is aware, she believes that she is not following the directive. Moreover, the disobedient behavior is in this case intended by the agent. As far as her desires are concerned, the agent desires not to follow the directive. Let's move on the second phenomenon, that is the ironic process. The ironic process is this: the agent tries to suppress a certain thought. In order to do so, the agent has to monitor her mental activity. The agent has to monitor her mental activity in order to check whether the suppression of the forbidden thought has been successful or not. But often, ironically, the result of this monitoring is that the forbidden thought persists in the agent's mind. In a famous experiment, the experimenters instructed the participants not to think about a white bear. Participants struggled with this task. They reported that they thought about a white bear more than once per minute, even when directly instructed to try not to think of a white bear. Look at the scheme in the slide. In this case, like in the psychological reactance, the agent is aware that he is not following the directives. But unlike in psychological reactance, in this case, the agent desires to follow the directives. And we can then move on the third and also the most important of the phenomena we are analyzing, that is mental contamination. In the previous distorting phenomena, the agent is aware of the fact that she is not complying with the directives. In mental contamination, not only the subject wants to comply with the directives, discarding the dangerous information, but in addition to that, the agent believes that she has succeeded in discarding, in neutralizing the unwanted information. She is aware of the information. She knows that the dangerous information has reached her, but she believes that the information is not affecting her action. And this is the most important thing in the practical field. We may also say that the agent believes that the information is present in her thoughts, but that is not present in her deliberation. The information is affecting her in thoughts, but not in her actions. In this sense, we may also say that the agent believes that she is able to compartmentalize her thoughts, and she is effectively and efficiently compartmentalizing her thoughts, separating thoughts that are useful for the deliberation from those which are useless or forbidden. So the agent wants to comply with the directive, excluding the dangerous information, and the agent believes that she's excluding it. But the truth is another. Even though the agent believes that she is not using the information to deliberate, the truth is that the information is affecting her deliberation. It affects her deliberation unconsciously. As the author of the study we have analyzed before remark, what makes mental contamination particularly pernicious is that it can operate outside of conscious thought. The agent believes that she is behaving like a person who never acquired the information, like the judges of the experiment about the rape shield, but instead her behavior is very different and resembles the behavior of people who are openly willingly then using the information in their deliberation. Her forbidden thought is contaminating her other thoughts, and more importantly, her forbidden thought is contaminating her deliberation process and then her actions. Going back to the idea of the compartmentalization of thinking, the lesson to learn when we consider mental contamination is that our ability to compartmentalize our thoughts is very limited. Two phenomena may be distinguished within mental contamination. The first phenomenon is that of sorry sorry I was saying that the first phenomenon is that of contaminated information processing. An obstacle to the compartmentalization of our beliefs and then of our decision making process is that acquired information creates a scheme, a framework, which will affect the processing of subsequent information. The framework will make certain subsequent information more vivid, more available, and the framework will drive the understanding, the interpretation of new information. This problem has to do with the famous halo effect. In a famous experiment, Solomon Asch studied what has been then called as the halo effect. Solomon Asch gave presented to the people involved in the experiments two lists of adjectives. The first list: A, intelligent, industrious, impulsive, critical, stubborn, envious. The second list: envious, stubborn, critical, impulsive, industrious, intelligent. The sets of adjectives were identical, but the order of the adjectives was the opposite. In the first set, the positive adjectives come first and the negative later, while in the second set, the negative adjectives came first and the positive later. As expected, people judged more positively the person whose description started with the positive adjectives. But what interests us most is a particular aspect of this experiment. In both cases, there were some ambiguous adjectives. The first impression, driven by the first adjectives, influenced the interpretation of the ambiguous adjectives, like impulsiveness and being critical. Halo effect proves that we have hard times in compartmentalizing our thoughts. If the previous information affects unconsciously the acquisition of the subsequent information, the distortion will persist even if the previous information has been discredited. It survives on the subsequent information that have been acquired, gathered, and processed. And then we can move on the second and last phenomenon underlying mental contamination, that is belief perseverance. When people acquire new information, they integrate it in their web of beliefs. As a result, if they are instructed to ignore the information which has been acquired, this, as we have seen, will prove difficult for them. There are two experiments which are useful to understand the phenomenon of belief perseverance. The first experiment is the experiment of the evaluation of the teacher. In this experiment, participants are asked to rate, to rank the performance and to rate how pleasant a teacher assistant is, how nice a teacher assistant is, on a scale from 1, least nice, to 10, nice, so very nice. In the first experimental group, some experimenters in disguise, so actors, told participants negative information, give participants negative information about the teacher. In the second experimental group, the actors narrated the same information, but afterwards they asked participants to disregard this information for extra epistemic reasons, like I probably shouldn't have told you those things about that guy. In the third experimental group, they told negative negative information. Afterwards, they asked participants to disregard the information, as it was in the second group. But in this case, they resorted to epistemic reasons. They said, for example, that they were confused and they were not making reference to that teacher, but they were speaking about of another person. So their comments, their critiques on that person were devoid of any relevance. Finally, In the control group, the participants didn't hear any negative information about the teaching assistant. Two things are interesting about this study. First, look at the first and the second experimental group. The first heard the negative information, the second heard this information as well, but was requested to suppress information, to suppress the data. Still, the ranking of the second group was very close to the ranking of the first group, and very different from the ranking of the control group. The suppression was totally ineffective, as in the study we've seen with the judges. Second thing to consider. Compare the second group and the third group. They both heard the negative information and were asked to suppress it. Still, the ranking of the third group is higher than the ranking of the second group. This means that the reasons supporting the suppression are relevant for the effectiveness of the suppression. Epistemic reasons worked better than extra epistemic ones in this case. But we should not place too much hope in the reasons given in favor of suppressing information. In a second experiment, subjects were instructed in a second experiment that we are considering, subjects are instructed to read some suicide letters, knowing that some of them are fake suicide letters. Later, the experimenter ranked their performances. Some of them performed well, while others poorly, according to this ranking. In a second stage, the experimenter revealed that all the letters were fake, and then the experimental rankings of the performance was devoid of any importance. In a third stage, the experimenter asked participants to rank their ability to recognize true suicide letters. The result of this experiment is that those who have been evaluated positively at the beginning of the experiment told that they would have performed well even in a real task, while those who have been evaluated negatively answered that they would have performed poorly. So even if they had epistemic and even if they had very compelling epistemic reasons to ignore the evaluation, the information they acquired, their ranking, persisted in their thoughts and affected their behavior. This last experiment is useful to emphasize the peculiarity of the phenomenon we are considering. At the beginning of the lesson, we addressed the case of radically irrelevant information. Let's think to the study showing that judges are likely to fine more harshly a nightclub for a noise ordinance violation when the name of the club incorporated a big number instead of a small number. The number in the name of the nightclub worked as an anchor for the determination of the amount of the fine. Which is the difference, someone may ask, between the anchor and belief perseverance, as illustrated by the case of the fake suicide letters? Even though the number in the name of the nightclub is an information, it is an information in a very minimal sense. There is no moment when the agent believes that the string of number incorporated in the name of the club is relevant for any purposes. Or again, remember the experiment in which participants were requested to throw a pair of dice in order to determine the prosecutor's request. In this case, the participants know from the very beginning that their request is irrelevant, since it has been determined at random. In the experiment about the suicide letters, things are very different. There is a moment in which the participants believed that the evaluation of their performance was relevant. Their belief elicited other beliefs about their capabilities in recognized suicide letters, and these beliefs persisted after the evaluation was debunked because the experimenters revealed that all the suicide letters were fake. I will conclude with some remarks about the strategies to tackle the difficulty of deliberately disregarding relevant but inadmissible information. The problem of disregarding inadmissible evidence is, as we have seen, the difficulty of compartmentalizing our thoughts. The natural solution for this problem consists then in a forced compartmentalization reached through institutional engineering. First of all, the different roles of judges should be separated where possible. A useful separation is that between pre-trial proceedings and trial proceedings. Inadmissible evidences may enter in the pre-trial proceedings. This information may surely affect the trial if the same judge is assigned to both stages. But if different judges are assigned to each phase, so that the judge assigned to the trial never know about the inadmissible evidence, the distorting influence it will be stopped. Another measure regards the use of jury. Of course, jurors are themselves affected by inadmissible evidences and irrelevant factors. But while they are affected by inadmissible evidences, they may contribute to the compartmentalization of the judicial proceeding, stopping mental contamination. In fact, while judges are unable to shield themselves from inadmissible elements, they may effectively shield jurors, and jurors may then assess the facts without prejudices. In other words, both in the pre-trial phase and in trial, judges would behave like gatekeepers, ensuring that jurors do not know misleading information. The resulting picture would be that of a system of divided decision making in which judges serves as gatekeeper and the jury serves as fact finder. This may be useful again to improve the ability of the system to resist to inadmissible information. The lesson is finished. I hope you enjoyed it, and I want to thank you for your attention. If you want to have additional information on this project and on the topics of this lesson, you can consult the materials and the website of Recognize. Thank you again, and goodbye.